Hey everybody, this is Grant Burgess, and we are on week 3 of Hip Hop and Downtempo using Ableton. We're going to actually get into using music samples this week, so you should have in your week 3 folder a copy of a song called Coffee Cold by Galt McDermott. If you aren't taking the college class, you can find this track. You can buy it on iTunes. It's a heavily sampled track, which is one of the reasons that I chose it for this class, just because a lot of people have used it. It's fairly easy to sample, and so we're gonna cut this up. So the first thing we want to do is we want to drag it right there, and remember it'll create a new track. And if you double click on the clip itself, you'll see all of this. This is the entire song. It's over 3 minutes long. Hopefully. And this might be a setting that you have set differently. I don't have Ableton automatically warp my tracks. And the reason for that is that I do this exact process quite a bit. So if it's warped, if it looks, well, yours will look all chopped up, just go ahead and click warp to turn it off. We want to just have this track raw. So we're going to listen to just the beginning of it real quickly. Okay, so what we want is just that first, I think 4 bars, basically what we just heard. So if you grab, so you'll see 2 different arrows on either side of this clip, and the top one defines your loop region, but since we're not warped and we're not looped, the top one doesn't do anything. So if you drag this bottom arrow over, any part that's still lighter, any part that's not gray, is the part that you're keeping. So we're going to zoom down. I remember if we have the magnifying glass, you just have to click and hold and move up and down, and you can zoom. So we're going to zoom down, and we're going to listen to to see if we can find the first count of this track. So there are kind of 2.5 or 3 piano notes before the first count, so let's listen. Okay, so it sounds like these quiet ones are going to be the ones we take out. So let's listen again and watch and see if this really is 1. Okay, it looks like it's 1. So we're going to move this arrow now, so the bottom one, right up to there, and we'll zoom in. And I'm going to let's see if we want to take just the beginning part of that kind of lead in, because it looks like the drummer and the piano player didn't quite play, the 1 on the exact time. So you get to kind of pick what sounds better. So if we listen to this, okay, well, let's bring it in a little bit and see if that sounds better. Now it sounds a little cut off. So let's go ahead and keep that this little bit right in here. So all you have to do is you right click now that you have the beginning figured out, and you don't have to do this until the end, but I always do, and you click crop sample, and that cuts out anything that was here. I'll undo that. You'll see you have all of this that's gray and this little bit at the beginning that's gray. If you click crop sample, it just keeps what was in kind of the white area. So now we want to listen for the end of this phrase, because what we're going to do is we're going to warp this to match our 85 beats per minute tempo that we have up here. So let's take a listen. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3. So it sounds like this right here is going to be the first count of the next 4 bars, and we want to take that out. So let's go ahead and bring it in here. We're going to listen one more time just to make sure that sounds right. So go ahead and count it to yourself, and you should be able to count 4 count bars. Yeah, so that sounds right to me. So I'm going to right click again and click crop sample. So now what we have is the 4-bar phrase that we want to sample. So what we're going to do is we want this to, right now this is in the original recorded tempo. We want this to match the tempo of maybe the drums that we made earlier. So what we're going to do is we're going to click warp, and this is very similar to what we did with the breakbeats last week. In terms of we're just going to right click on it. This is a 4-bar loop. We counted 4 measures, so it's a 4-bar loop. So now it's been warped to a 4-bar loop. And for the most part, because it's a pretty evenly played song, it looks like, a lot of these hits, if you zoom in, well, that looks like that'll probably be the hit at the beginning of the second bar. It's pretty close. So let's listen to it with the metronome on. Wonderful. And the loop button is turned on. If it's not looping back for you, make sure this button down here is turned on. So we've got some hits we're going to want to clean up. Now I am using complex here. A lot of times I would use repitch, freeze it, and flatten it. And we're going to be doing some of that, but not with a repitch. So if you've got complex, depending on which version you're using, you might not have these 3 down here. Play around with beats, tones, and texture to see what's going to give you the best sound. It's really just about what comes out right for each sample. So just play with it. But I'm on complex, and I'm going to want this. I'm going to want to kind of move things around. So this snare here, if you remember all the way back to week 1, we're putting our snares on 1.2. This is the drum. These are the drums that we made before, and so they have a snare here on 1.2. So the snare from this, if we listen, that's the snare here. So we're going to want to bring that over to 1.2. And we're doing that, just to remind you, we're doing that the same way we did with the breakbeats, and that is we're writing in warp markers. So if you see the little gray thing that comes up that suggests where the warp marker should go, these little tiny triangles right in here, be easier to see on your machine than it is on this video, but these are called transients, and they basically are just guesses where the hits are, where the volume spikes pretty dramatically. So we're going to trust it for now. Sometimes it's wrong, but we're going to trust it for now. So we're going to make one. Let's not make one there. We'll make one at 1.4. That's really close to being on, so we're being nitpicky, and sometimes that can make it sound mechanical. But so just double click up there to make the warp marker and drag it onto the place you want it. We'll do 2.2. We'll do 2.4. We'll do 3 just to leave it there. So if something's where you want it, 3 was pretty close to where I would want it. Sometimes you put a warp marker on it anyway, and what that does is it anchors it down. Now if I were to put one on 3.2 and move it around, the starting point of 3 doesn't change. So we like where 3 is, and so we're going to keep it there, so we put an anchor on it. Everything in the middle can move around, and if something gets messed up, we put more anchors down, and we stretch things in different ways. So we got 3.2. Let's take 3.4. And this one looks a little strange. There's this big hit here, but there's another big hit here. So we're going to have to listen to it. But let's take this transient. Let's trust Ableton and move it over. And move 4.2 over. So we've got a lot of stretching there. Something weird might be happening, which is okay. Now, if you end up with like kind of a gap at the end here, or if it's running over the edge here, make sure that there's a warp marker right here at the end. Because, again, that's anchoring it to the end. We know where the end of the clip is. We want it anchored right there. So let's go ahead and take a listen to this again now that it's warped, and see if it sounds any better. So the metronome's on. We're going to play it. Okay, so that's not bad, but I do think that this fourth count, for some reason, is a little off. So we're going to double click to remove that warp marker, and let's leave it how it kind of is naturally, and see if that sounds any better. Okay, so there's something going on here with the way maybe the drums are rolling in that it just sounds more natural when you don't warp it. So we're going to keep it like that. So we want, if you remember from the breakbeat episode, week 2, we want to take this sample with all the warps in it, but we want to get the warp markers out, because remember, warp markers are going to be able to tell Ableton how we want to slice any particular sample, as well as where we want to warp it. If you warp something and then you slice it to a new MIDI track, or you drag this over to a sampler, or you do anything with this, you'll lose all the things that you've done here. Because what needs to happen is you need to be able to bounce this track. And they don't call it bouncing in Ableton, but you need to be able to bounce this track so that it retains all of this information. You know, all your volume information, your warp information, and your any effects you may have put on it. So we are going to right-click on the track up here and click Freeze Track. So now it's frozen, and then we're going to flatten it. And before we do that, I was asked recently why anyone would ever freeze a track and not flatten it. What's the point of having two things, freezing it and flattening it? The reason is that when you warp a sample, when you put effects on a sample, or if you're playing, a VST synthesizer or something, it's putting a load on your CPU. And in a live application, you can't have that much. I mean, there's a threshold where you can't have too much on your CPU, or it won't be able to process. When you freeze it, it's already bounced the track. It's already rendered it as an audio file with all of the effects and parameters built into it. So it takes the load entirely off the CPU, and it makes it much easier for Ableton to run multiple different things. For our purposes, we're not interested in that, so we always flatten it. And again, it gives us these two. Go ahead and drag. Remember, this is your loop parameter, this top set of triangles, top bracket. So drag that over, right-click, crop sample, and let's take a listen to what we just warped and freezed and flattened with the metronome. Okay, that loops really well. It's perfect. So what we want to do is we want to make 4 slices out of this so that we can play it like we did with this breakbeat. So if you remember, we'll go and stop this. We took this Lou Rawls breakbeat. Okay, and we sliced it into its pieces here with this drum rack, and we played it on its own. So we're going to do the exact same thing with this Galt McDermott sample. So we're just going to put, there's already a warp marker here on 1. We're going to put 1 on 2, and on 3, and on, see, 4 is, the transient wants us to put it here. We're going to put it right on 4. So you can double click anywhere you want, doesn't matter if there's a transient there, and it'll write a warp marker in. So again, we just right click, slice to new MIDI track, and create 1 slice per warp marker, just like we did with the breakbeat. Slicing preset built in, so everything's the same. And it now slices a new track for us. Now, if you have your MIDI controller set up, or if you're using your typing keyboard to trigger samples, remember that you can't do that until the track is armed. So you want to turn the arming off on the breakbeat track, and then you want to turn it on for the Galt McDermott track. So now, if you use you should have, okay, so you have got all 4 of these samples sliced there. Now you have to do a couple of things to make them work. Turn your release all the way up, because if we're going to do this kind of as an MPC, you want your release all the way up, and I turn the decay all the way up. So now if I hit a slice, it's going to play it, even if I just tap it really quickly, it's going to play it all the way through that slice parameter. So if you look at the slice itself, it should play all the way through this. Okay, so that's what we want. But we're going to run into a problem right now that we didn't run into with the drums. And the problem is that when you have two slices that are long like this, they can't play on top of each other. Well, at least you don't want them to play on top of each other because it sounds crazy. So here, I'll give you an example. I'll play slice 1, and then I'm going to bring slice 2 in about halfway, and you'll hear how crazy it gets. So you hear them kind of overlapping and kind of interfering with each other. Well, you don't want that. So the way to fix that is if you go over here again to your show hide chain list. It's going to bring up this very familiar. This is the same thing we've been working with since day one. And again, you open up your input-output section. And so you remember we worked with the receive buttons to layer these drums in week 2. We're not going to mess with that now. We're not going to mess with the play now. We're going to mess with the choke. And the way that a choke works is you have got, in this pull-down menu, you have got 16 groups that you can assign to each sample. Now the groups, the numbers these could be letters or they could be colors. All it means is that you are placing this in one of the groups, and if this is on 16 and this is on 16, that's just the easiest one to click on. Because these are all in the same group, none of them will let two samples play at the same time. So if I play 1 and then I instantly go to play 2, 2 will turn 1 off. So they constantly will turn off the one before it. And so what you get is something like this. And they don't overlap. They don't get in each other's way. So that process of getting to right here, this is kind of base camp. From here, knowing how to work your chokes, knowing how to slice things up, this is really like the beginning of doing anything you could possibly want. Because without knowing it, you've also been working with Simpler, which is very similar to Sampler. I like to use Sampler better. So now you know how to use a sampler in Ableton, and you know how to do sequencing in Ableton because you've done it with this drum rack and with this drum rack over here. You know how to slice samples. So everything up until this point, especially this week, get this down, because even if this isn't exactly the way you want to do it, understanding the ins and outs of everything that we've worked on here will get you way further. And I know this is kind of a lot. It's a little abstract. And I think the first thing that people ask me when I kind of describe this method to them is, why do I go through so many things with treating the sample before I even get it, sliced up? I mean, that's kind of seems a little overkill. The reason that I go through the process of warping this as a 4-bar loop, this original thing, slicing it down to the 4 bars, warping it as a 4-bar loop, and then trimming up every little hit to make it sound right, and then freezing it, and then flattening, and then slicing it, is because now, if I turn the drums on, and I were to play not this audio clip that we've chopped up, but I were to actually play these samples from the Galt McDermott that we've sliced up, with the drums playing, they are stretched to be perfectly in time with the drums. So, as a matter of fact, what I'll do is I'll move. Remember, this is that kind of stock one they give you. We're just going to get rid of it. I'll just write one in so that you can see that if it's in time here, it's going to be in time with everything in the rest of the piece. Okay, so I've just done something really simple. So if I play these, they'll be just perfectly in time. And if I'll take that one out, and I'll take slice 4 out and move that up there. So with these two, so it's all nice and simple, and it all fits together. So I was hearing when I was playing it with the MIDI controller, I was hearing some kind of weird pieces of these slices. So I kind of want to go in and I want to look and make sure that everything looks how I want it to. So I want to look at the end here of slice 1. So the end of slice 1, it's got a little bit of slice 2 in it. So I'm going to move that back. So you can see kind of where this starts to peak up for slice 2. We want to move those apart. So if I play slice 2, that's got a little bit, so we're going to move it just in. And you don't want to do this too much because then you're going to get gaps in between your samples. So you have to be kind of careful with what you do. It's mostly beginnings that you're worried about. I almost feel like we could maybe get just a little bit better beginning of this. Let's drag the beginning of slice 3 back. Now yours will look different because you would have moved yours in slightly different ways. I'm just kind of showing you the way that you clean these bits up. So we're going to move the end of slice 3 back as well. So slice 3. That's still got a little bit, but we'll worry about it later. Okay. These are all kind of they're out of each other's way because of the chokes, and they're also not going over in time, and so they're getting little artifacts from the other slices. So that's where we want it. If you still have a problem with the beginnings, you can adjust this attack parameter over here. What it does is it basically tells Ableton to take a certain amount of time to get to full volume. 0.88 milliseconds is a really short amount of time. If you have got, if you're listening to slice 1 and you think, well, no, that comes in a little strong, which I don't think it does, but you can always move this up. So now you're at 2.35 milliseconds. Doesn't really do much. Not until you get to about, probably 9 or 10. So you see it really kind of softens that first hit up. You kind of use it only as much as you need. I think that's plenty to bite off for this week. Just practice this over and over again. Practice writing these clips in. Practice playing it on your MIDI controller or your keyboard. Practice bringing samples in and chopping them up. And just kind of do it over and over again. It's something that, once you get used to it, it takes no time to get done. You just bring a sample in, chop it up, and then you get to immediately work with it. But yeah, we're gonna stop here. We're gonna, just kind of take your time, getting to know all of these little features, and then next week we'll get into more of the ways that we clean these up, make them sound better, and some tricks that we can use to really get the most out of the samples that we pull. So I will see you guys next week. Thanks for watching. Peace.